request in California, and we're going to look at the forms. The other day I did a long version of this, and I was frankly stunned as I was going through all the permutations of what realtors do versus what a client would really want. So I'm going to try to walk us through there, but this time I won't be stunned because I've actually prepared for it. I'm going to show a form that I would consider using as an attorney. And I think sellers can use it. I mean, I don't mind if realtors are using it, although really I firmly believe there should be an attorney on the team. But here we go. This is what, let's say, this is a purchase agreement from 625. Let's say they wrote in, it's a 1.6 listing. They write in 1.5. That would be the scenario. Then they come down here and they check. I actually thought I downloaded the agreement that already had the numbers in. Oh, here it's 3%. So I did. So now a seller is faced with the idea that they want to counter the price of the property up from 1.5. And I would always advise a counter. Back in the short sale days when sellers didn't care, they sometimes said, I don't even want to do a counter. Let me just sign it. And some of the time, buyers would get suspicious and not buy and just like walk. So they always want to feel like they have to work a little hard for it, would be my advice there. So you're going to counter, and let's say you're going to counter to 1.575, thinking you'll get to 1.550. And then what do you do with the 3%? It's a little low. Like if it came in at 1.4, you definitely wouldn't want to be paying 3%. So let's actually work on that second scenario. 1.4 comes in, and you're concerned. You talk to your agent, you talk to the lawyer helping you, and you're like, well, I was in agreement I could pay 3% at 1.6, but at 1.4, 1.450, 1.5, that's too low. I don't want to pay that much money for buyer agent commission because I need a net to do what I'm doing to buy the new home or whatever you're doing with the money. So a realtor, not aware that the SIPR case says that they cannot even contemplate choosing one form over two or what form in which to present the counter, doesn't even contemplate that this is a third-party beneficiary clause and therefore affects the rights of third parties when they counter it, and isn't even aware of the idea of what happens when they uncheck this box and how to explain to the seller how to mitigate those risks. Like a realtor who thinks they're competent to do this transaction without an attorney on the team might do something like this. They might say purchase price to be 1.575, close of escrow in 31 days, all other terms of the original offer to remain in place. This is an attorney. This would be a realtor who's like, wow, I really don't have, because this is a counter form, I don't have the language to properly counter. I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'll just tell the seller, the buyer could walk if we counter, so therefore we should just get that price up there as close to 1.6 as possible. You know, and logically, that's a pretty good move, right? There's two parts of a contract. One is for the price in terms of the home, and one is for buyer agent commission. So why not make it up negotiating hard on the buyer agent commission? Pretty good strategy. But the issue is when the realtor says that, a few things happen. One, they're walking right into the steering, price fixing, keeping commissions high, the very trap that the DOJ and the lawyers went after the realtors for. They're compromising the fiduciary. The buyer's agent, they're making the price high to accommodate buyer agent commissions. But let's say your seller's not even that risk averse. They're not worried about getting sued later. They're not risk averse because they're moving out of the country and they're going to put the money somewhere. Let's say that's not even a price, but they would like to get the most money. Is this the way to do it? It's one way. I think it breaches the fiduciary duty of the client. And it's not helping the client get a high net. But it's what a lot of realtors are doing. It's a very passive way. They're not leveraging buyer agent compensation. But, I don't, you might not get the 1.575. You might come down 100,000, and then you might still have high buyer agent commission. So what's the second thing? And I've talked to realtors. This is what they're doing. Some. They'll do the negotiations, and then they'll come back in the end and say purchase price to be 1.550, seller to pay buyer. Oh, let me show it. I think I need to show it. Now we'll talk about what. Here it is. Okay, so now we saw the first one. It was 1575, close of escrow to be 31 days. Now, the second one would be purchase price to be 1550, seller to pay buyer broker compensation 2% of purchase price, notwithstanding paragraph 3G of the RPA. I asked Gemini to find an example of what was being taught on the net. And frankly, I don't really know what that notwithstanding paragraph 3G3 of the RPA means. Maybe that was Gemini writing something in, but it brings up the point that because of all the issues that paying buyer agent compensation create, according to the class action suits in the DOJ, there would be a point. Like, one of the most important things is if G3 is like this, seller payment to compensate buyer's broker, and this is a third-party beneficiary contract, rights are being affected. If you're changing those numbers, there would be reasons to say box G3 is hereby unchecked, rather than notwithstanding paragraph 3G3 of the RPA. Like, frankly, that's not, in my mind, a great counter. The other issue I ask is, why would you, as a seller or a realtor, think that you would want to negotiate buyer agent compensation before you came to terms on the price of the home? I think this is a very weak way and somewhat destructive of the seller's rights by putting 2% into this box. This blank box in the counteroffer form is a mistake, as I was showing, for so many reasons, because right now there's a chance you just blew up this deal at this point in time because you wrote in 2% far too soon. Like, I think you want to negotiate buyer agent compensation in a way that you're working on the price in terms of the home and then buyer agent compensation. It's like a two-step process. Now, I'm not saying screw buyer's agents. I'm just saying don't put it together now, because now you have two reasons for the buyer to walk. Like, oh, the price is wrong. 550 seems like they'd still be in the ballpark. But let's say you went 595 and 2%. That buyer's like, well, I don't want to pay my own buyer agent 1% and 1595. They're gone. This wasn't, some people say this isn't a good faith effort. The agent might talk their buyer into going somewhere else. Like, this is not the time to do that. I would suggest that you would consider something more like this. Oh, that's my old one. Just imagine this thing is gone, and we're just looking at purchase price shall be 1550, close of escrow to be a date, box 3G3 of the RPA is hereby unchecked. Let's just make sure that I had that right at the time I wrote it. G3, yeah, and that's the checkbox they put in, and I would uncheck it. I thought about it. There's pros and cons to both. As a lawyer, I think I would advise my sellers to uncheck the box, but I would explain all the issues to them, but that's for a different video. Oh, that's what I'm saying we're going to get to. Now, I would say, rather than countering 2% at any time, I would say compensation amenability. Seller is amenable to buyer agent compensation of 3%, provided the request for said compensation is made via. Now, you could attach the form that you would create, or you could tell them to go, if you're an attorney like me, I would actually tell the buyer to go to a website. I'd have them watch a little video explaining that, buyer agent compensation got realtors sued for $1.6 billion. Their forms have reversed the process and put the seller at risk. I'm an attorney. I've advised my seller that. And I said, but if you are wanting to sell your home, it might be a good idea to pay an advisor to a buyer's agent, but that comes with some risks. So if the buyer would like you to pay the buyer's agent, we should provide this video. And in the video, I would explain, some of the buyers were claiming they didn't realize that the money to pay their buyer agent was coming from their funds. So we're going to ask you, Mr. Buyer, to say you understand that it has been said that the source of funds to pay a buyer agent is a buyer's agent. To pay the buyer's agent is the buyer's money. And we understand money is fungible because it's also the seller's money because they get that full price and it hurts them. But class action plaintiffs were saying that the buyers were confused that it could have been their money. They were told it wasn't. And there's a chance you were said, don't worry, we'll get the seller to pay for it. But because money's fungible, it could be argued that it was your money that paid your agent. Consequently, and this would be a choice for the seller, this would be a hoop the seller could put the buyer through. You say, we're paying your buyer's agent as a courtesy to you because you requested it, but you could have sought a price reduction instead. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure I want to put that in there for all sellers. I'm a very risk-averse seller. I definitely put it in. It's very a protective clause. I don't know that I always want to do it, but that's one of the things I discuss with my seller. Do you want the buyer to acknowledge that they could have bought your house for 2.5% cheaper? And you can see why. Just these things you have to cancel a seller about. This is what those class action suits are all about. Was the price of the home raised so that buyer agent commissions could be high? And just the forms that they're using and the conversations you have to have with a seller, it's a problem. I would mitigate the risks. You have two choices there that I discussed. There are other ways as well. I would discuss all those ways. But in the end, we're educating, we're attaching forms. We could just have the buyer waive things, or we could have them acknowledge things, or we could watch them a video to download the forms, as I would do as an attorney if it was okay with my seller, because I think that's the softest way to get to strong mitigation. So we have completion and return of the attached forms with completion and return of the attached forms with this counteroffer. I rewrote this page. It would be completion of the forms attached to this counteroffer and buyer download, or if I was working with an attorney or I'm setting this up for my client, I would eliminate A. I go right to B and say is made for said compensation is made via the forms buyer can download at, and I put my URL there, and I might have the little intro video or just an intro paragraph explaining source of funds and some other things and saying we're asking you to waive your rights with respect to those issues. Now, here's something of a suggested attached form. I do not want to go into all of it that I would spin through here, but I would have the seller and the buyers delineated here just so we weren't making mistakes. Buyer's brokerage is important. We would want the buyer's broker to sign off on this. We'd have the home purchase price there, and we'd have the money. In this case, I chose a sample of 3%. And then I have disclosures, I have acknowledgments, and I have I would definitely have the buyer's broker sign and the buyer, and instructions to escrow on which would be almost identical to the concepts in the car forms, to make sure that the buyer's agent got paid only at the close of escrow. And now, what does this mean? This means that for the first round of negotiations, if you come back to here, instead of the buyer seeing that their agent was going to get, they're already lost 1% because they're going to be paying 1% to their agent because they're probably locked into a contract. And whatever the counter and the purchase price is, instead of blowing up the deal or risking that, you're keeping it in play. I mean, if you're saying you're amenable to 3% buyer agent compensation, provided the buyer downloads these forms and and they can submit 3%, you've got at least one more round completed, and then you can talk to your attorney about how you want to deal with this form and your counter to their counter. You could do the counter again, just like this. Say we're still amenable but 3%, and make that a new term. Maybe they're negotiating well and you have to come down to 1,450, but you still would keep it at 3%. And then let's say you get to price and terms on the price of the home. That's where someone authorized in writing, which your agent is not. Let's say you're agreeing, you're willing to sell the home for 1,450, and the closing date is good. So you've wrapped it all up, except now it's time for the seller to sign the buyer agent compensation request. Right? Now it's time for you, the seller, to sign this. What do you do? Well, the price is there, everything's there, and it's taking your signature to close the deal. This is, let's say we're on a, say it's $1 million home, 1% is $15,000. You're not so sure. You'd like to make more money, and you're like, man, I don't even think that the buyer's agent has the right to tell his or her client no when we're good on price and terms of the home. You're saying, I understand the DRE has said a buyer's agent can't put their own financial interests in front of the buyer's interests. So you're like, wow, I would really like to know if my client counters to 2%, if that's going to blow up this deal. I'd like to get on the phone and negotiate this with the buyer's agent. Now, who's authorized to do that in writing and legally? And that is a stunning question when you think about it. Because the Department of Justice, how much time? I don't see the clock going on this, unfortunately. The Department of Justice has gone to the California Association of Realtors and made them remove all forms related to buyer agent compensation. When I look in the database, they have no forms related to buyer agent compensation. I mean, just think about it. This is their counteroffer. It's like, how is an agent even supposed to legally be writing in those terms? These are affecting third-party rights. This is not proper work for an agent who's not an attorney. This is a violation of the Sigler case, which is a criminal case. If the defendant had only been called upon to perform and had only undertaken to perform the clerical service of filling in the blanks on a particular form in accordance with the information furnished him by the parties, or had merely acted as a scrivener to record the stated agreement of the parties to the transaction, he would not have been guilty of practicing law without a license. But what he did was, they said he chose the form. So basically, realtors are not allowed to do anything but fill in the blanks. They're not even allowed to cross out the blanks, but they can fill them in. They can take dates and times, put them in there. They can accept the words of, counter to 1,450. They can put those in the blank forms. But according to SIFR, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to bifurcate into two separate negotiations, which they should, which would be a major advantage, which is what we're talking about here. But now it's time to decide. What's the seller going to do? Who can get on the phone with the buyer's agent and say, hey, look, we can get this deal done right now if you'll accept a counter to 2%. If we can get this deal done, my client, if you'll send over the counter, if you write 2% in, I'll have my client sign it. They're with me right now. Can we get this done at 2%? I would say most agents would say yes. And you can even inquire further if you're an attorney. I don't see how a realtor could, because it's third-party rights. You're like, well, are you going, if we counter to 2, can you make sure that your buyer's not going to have to pay you more? Like, how's that going to work? Now, these are interesting questions for the entire profession, because I could say as an attorney, I wouldn't do that work for my seller unless I had explained to them the risks and I had written authorization to represent them in this matter. It's a third-party beneficiary contract pursuant to a third-party beneficiary clause. There are risks. I don't see how a listing agent can inquire about what will happen if we go to 2%. Is your buyer still going to need to pay you 1% more, or will you and do have the right, and you and your client, you and your broker agree that the seller will only have to pay you 2%. And it's a difficult thing, because if they were doing this for negotiation purposes, let's say they really already had a 2% there, and they were trying to get 3 so the buyer's agent could get paid more, or so that the buyer could get paid more. That is very questionable. We can go into that other times. But if you understand what the law was, that that might be a difficult problem for the buyer's agent. So I'm just suggesting to you that the proper way to negotiate is to bifurcate. I'm strongly suggesting if you want a higher price, if you want a higher net, you need to bifurcate these contracts, because going to this number without bifurcating or going to this without bifurcating is a major mistake. You could be blowing up the deals too soon. You could be selling for far less, a lower net. And if you do it our smart way, and here's another problem with just the fact that this checkbox is in here. You're allowing, I really want people to understand this. This checkbox, realtors are working, their association is working for them. Their association wanted to keep buyer agent commissions higher. It looks like that was the purpose of these forms in this process. That, how can we keep them high? Well, we can force the buyer and the buyer's agent to force the buyer to agree to give them the amount of money they'd like to get on these deals, and they've learned to make it high before they even show the home. That's not California law. That's a rule. So that process, that form is kept commissions high. They went up in the first half of 2025, according to Redfin. Now, they check this box right here and ask the seller to pay. It's really odd. The realtor doesn't have any forms to properly do it. They don't have a proper way to counter. They can't advise on the risks. They can't advise on mitigating the risks. And it's like, what are you doing putting that in at any time? I mean, it really should be bifurcated into two separate negotiations. It's a shame. It makes it easier, but it's an absolute shame for sellers. It's costing them tens of thousands of dollars doing it this way, and potentially blowing up deals too soon. Whereas I think saying you're amenable to 3% and if the agent, and representing that, yeah, I mean, by saying, I mean, it's going to influence the agent, right? They're like, wow, this is a problem. This is great for the agent. They're getting all their money. This is a problem for the agent. It's already been countered down once. So this is better. You're saying you're amenable to 3%, but they're going to know that they probably better come in close to your terms if they want to keep their commissions high, because otherwise you'll have the ability later on to negotiate them down, and then you can protect yourself. There's proper ways to risk mitigate. I mean, if you're going to be paying the buyer's agents what they want and you've negotiated your price down to what the buyer wants, I don't think you should be taking on lawsuit risks, post-closing lawsuit risks for opportunistic plaintiff's attorneys. Not if you explain it to them well. They should sign right off on it. So that is the status. That is the current way to properly negotiate buyer agent compensation. Now, in another video, I will explain why some of this can be completely made superfluous with the proper marketing strategy. And it's super ironic the way it works together, in that if attorney and the agent were to get together on a team and explain to the seller that even though your realtor and their broker are not willing to broadcast buyer agent compensation, you as a seller are allowed to do it, because you as a seller, you're just telling realtors, I will pay you to help me sell my home. You don't care whether they're a buyer's agent or a listing agent. You don't have these same class action problems. You're saying, I will make unilateral offers of buyer agent compensation. I will market the 3% buyer agent compensation to the buyers most likely to be working with good, strong buyers in my area. I will put it out on social media that we're having an open house this weekend, that buyer agents are welcome, that we are offering 3% because that means smart buyers. And some of them are super smart. That's why they call agents directly. That's why they go to open houses. That's why they show up at open houses without agents. I mean, I back last spring, I had 45 people show up for the first day for an in-demand house. 90% of them, if not, 2 showed up with brokers. So they show up there for the reason they don't want to be tied down. You're going to get them to show up, and they're going to know that they can maybe negotiate for some of the 3%. They're going to get involved. It's a tremendous bait for motivated buyers, smart buyers, buyers working with strong agents. And if you can set up the multiple offer situation where the buyers compete against each other rather than the normal agent way where like you're countering back and forth, you're actually setting it up as a ladder system. You'll watch, as we did, the 9 offers came up in value. The lowest person, the person who won, came up over $200,000, and buyer agent commissions went down. So because they were negotiating against each other, you didn't even have to negotiate them down. They negotiated them down themselves. So you can use buyer agent compensation as leverage and even avoid all these problems, but you need to do it yourself and understand it so you can mitigate the risks, or you need to be with an attorney who can mitigate the risks and who works with a broker that understands that when properly counseled, they are allowed to broadcast offers of buyer agent compensation. And it also protects against some of the risks of discriminating against class action suits. So all of this, if you're an attorney who wants to help your clients sell for more and protect them, I've got a program where we give you our forms, we explain all this, we coach you as you then coach your client, and then you make the referral to the agent. And I believe you could get at least $10,000 for doing the work that I'd be coaching you on. And we can work together to accomplish that. I can also co-list, like if you don't want to do as much work, but you still want to make money, we've got a program for that. But go ahead, go to listingattorney.com, set up a phone call with us, and we'll talk to you about how we can get this done. And sellers, if you're seeing this on YouTube, which you probably will, I would put back in the short sale days, there were plenty of experienced attorneys. Some of them might still be around, otherwise we'll find them, but we'll get you the right attorney realtor team to get this done. So thanks. Talk to you later.